And we are live for the First Strike podcast. Welcome to my bedroom. It's another episode of another room in my apartment as I find the perfect place until I get soundboards and sound to put on the walls to record this in decent audio. So apologies on the visuals. Welcome to the show. You can check us out on magic.facetofacegames.com. And today is a very special episode. We got Andy, over reliable, but we finally got Bryan Gottileb back on the show. How's it going, my man? Sexiest man in Magic.
It's going fantastic, KYT. I should come on more often because I really need you to boost my self-esteem. I might be feeling a little bit down about myself. KYT will always bring me back up. And I appreciate you bringing me into your bedroom. I didn't know it was going to be this kind of intimate setting. I'm really excited right now.
Also excited to have Eduardo Oh man, I'm butchering his name live. Sajgalik on the show. Can't wait to have him on the show. And yeah, the only comment I have, Bryan, is like one of your profile pictures, your SCG profile pictures, like too old. I know it's not sexy enough. It doesn't reflect your current level of sexiness.
I'm not getting sexier. I promise you, it doesn't work that way. As I become older and older, it's not going to get better. I think we should cling to the past, and that's as good as it's going to get.
Yeah, there's been a lot of good. There's been some big tournaments this past weekend. There's a wave of RPTQs around the world. Some happened in Montreal, and Andy's prepping for his upcoming in Toronto. But it's we got to start the show with where have you been, Bryan? Like last we talked. I don't think you had moved yet, and I just want you to give our First Strike listeners an update on to where you're at. And yeah, everything that's happened since.
Sure. So I left the East Coast of the States, and I'm now on the West Coast. I live up in Seattle. I basically moved as far away from my old place as you possibly could. I drove like the 3,000 miles, and it took 5 days. So very, very far away. That's why you see a new backdrop behind me now, new room. And beyond that, I stopped practicing law, at least for the time being. And I'm just making content all the time. I'm talking about Magic over on the Game Podcast, which I know a lot of your listeners also tune into. I just launched a new podcast, which I'm super excited about. It's called Head Games, and it's still part of the Game Podcast family, but we're focusing more on the psychological aspects of gaming, and also not only focused on Magic the Gathering. We try very hard not to be Magic specific, even though that's, where a lot of my background lies and where my co-host Jonathan Carter's background also lies. But we've also competed in other things. I've played poker, and going back a ways now, but I competed in sports at a decent level. So we talk a lot about just performance, preparation, just getting your head in the right place for all kinds of competition. And it's exciting to be able to branch out a little bit into a new space. We have a lot of like strange listeners, like my parents listen every week, where they certainly do not listen to any of my Magic podcasts. And our editor, Connor O'Donnell, I know his father is a big fan. So we're really hot with parents right now. For whatever reason, we've cornered that market. But it's cool to be able to attract a new set of listeners and people who otherwise wouldn't get to hear what I've been up to. It's nice that I'm having a lot of old friends who I haven't talked to in a while being like, oh, I listened to your podcast. It was really great. So it's been an awesome experience, and also writing for Star City Games right now. So you can always read my content over there. And yeah, just really kind of diving in pretty hard to all forms of content creation. Maybe a little video coming soon. I don't know. A little bit of streaming. Still don't like streaming all that much, but a little bit of streaming here or there. But I think maybe some produced video might be something I'm getting into sometime soon as well. So a lot of stuff going on.
I can't help but feel a sense of validation that I was right about you, Bryan. I saw the talent from day one, and it just needed a platform like SCG for you to flourish. Like honestly, I don't know if you did anything specific because the Game Podcast was already known by a lot of spikes, but it really when you got on, and I'm being totally honest, it's then when it really decided to flourish. You pushed Jerry to do more, or was it because, like, what I've also noticed is that you're one of the most active people on Discord. when it comes to interacting with the listeners? Do you think it's that? Because there is something that you've done that has took it to a next level. I can feel it. It's not just, I'm not just saying it.
I think it's a combination of a bunch of things. It's the fact that Jerry and I gel really well together. We genuinely like talking with each other. We have a good time doing the podcast. And not to say that he didn't have that relationship with the prior co-hosts, but I think it's strong with us. We get along really well. And I think that's had a large impact. Like you said, I tried to be very community focused and always engaged. And, you know, when I was around the First Strike Nation more, I think people saw that. I really like helping people out. I like talking to people who are taking the time to listen to my content. It truly means a lot to me that people take the time to listen to what I'm talking about. And I think also one of the things that's interesting about Jerry is that he is considerate of other people's time and attention span, almost to a fault. Like, he feels guilty telling you what he's working on and what he's doing because he's so selfless and like interested in what's going on with your life that he won't tell you about his project. And that extends to the podcast somewhat. He doesn't want to spam people's feeds with advertisements. He doesn't want to, you know, he doesn't want to be in your face about it. He lets you find his content. If you like it, he's very happy for that. You get whatever amount of time he has to share with you, he'll share it with you, but he's not going to force you to listen to his content. Whereas I can be a little bit more in your face, like, hey, listen to this new thing's coming out. This is great. Let me know what you think. It's just a different like a different style. I mean, we're both respectful of people's times, but he does it to a very, very dramatic extent. He really doesn't want to take up any more space than he has to. Whereas you can tell I never shut up. So it's very difficult to get me not to talk about what I'm working on right now.
Going back to the Head Game podcast with your co-host and everything, I don't know, Bryan, if you played the game long enough where there was a lot of online content, books being published because the game was booming because of Chris Moneymaker and stuff like that. Did you get to the point where at some point the mental game and psychologists were trying to make their names in the space, and there were even books like the Mental Game of Magic, the Mental Game of Magic 2 and stuff like that? And now, only now, with him, your co-host, being on Channel Fireball, that's where we're I feel like is the first time.
No. I got to cut you off. That's not the same person. I do a cast with Jonathan Carter. Jonathan Carter, I'm not saying. Oh, it's not the same guy. It's not the same guy as the Channel Fireball. And listen, you're not the first person to say that. I want to be very clear about that. He does his own thing. He actually has his own podcast. I work with a gentleman by the name of Jonathan Carter who has made no content in this space. He hasn't produced anything before, but what he has done is he's done a lot of performance psych work, a ton. He works with the US Army. He's worked with some top esports competitors, be it in League of Legends or Overwatch, or he's worked with some Smash people, just all the top esports. He's had a hand in helping them improve their mental game, their psychological processes. He's been in it for years now, extremely experienced, but he had never done anything in this space prior to the podcast. And the way we found him was that he was a patron of the Game podcast. He had just like started playing competitive Magic again and was participating in our Discord. And over the course of being in the Discord and talking a bunch, we got to know his background. And Jerry and I both had this kind of like aha moment where I think it was the same day where we both like approached each other with this, where this guy seems like he really knows his stuff. And I think he would offer a lot to our listeners if we gave him a platform. And Jerry agreed. I agreed. Whoever brought it first, I don't remember. But I finally got the chance to meet him at a tournament. Loved his personality, got along with him right away, and was like, yeah, we have to go forward with this. So you're not the first person to make that mistake, but Jonathan is brand new to the content game. And kind of the way you feel good about finding me, I feel good about finding him because he's really good at what he does, and he's really bright, and he's just a good podcaster. We've recorded 3 episodes now. We're going to record our 4th very soon. He gets it. He's improving rapidly. He's only going to get better and better. And I think the first episodes were good, to be honest with you. I think we came out of the gate very strong. So it's awesome to see him really take to it very quickly.
I think a lot of it had to do with my mistake was when I first read the other guy, who was one of like the first guy who had like a degree in psychology and stuff like that. And when Jonathan came out, was just like, I just mentally associated, it must be this guy. Like, who else is doing it in this space? And I guess it was a coincidence that these two are coming in there. But Bryan, back to my earlier question, were you part of that, like the poker stuff? Were you aware of some of the people that were coming into the game and bringing that psychology as an aspect of poker to attack?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can look over at my bookshelf across the room right now, and I see I have The Psychology of Poker sitting right there, and that's a very old book and probably laughable at this point. I can't see the name, but it was published under like 2+2, so part of the David Skolansky series of books, and what ultimately became 2+2 forums. But absolutely, I've been aware of this kind of approach to mental gaming forever now, and it's something that I mean, I'm into it. I'm into optimization and like trying to understand our thinking processes better, and just getting the most out of my tools, because I don't think, especially when it comes to Magic, I'm not like a Magic prodigy. I'm very far from that. And if you've met Magic prodigies before and you see them sit down and play the game at this incredibly high level that like seemingly comes natural to them, you know the difference between, and I think you would put yourself in the same category, KYT. You know the difference between them and us. Like, they just do things on a totally different level. That's not where we're at. So I need to train, I need to think, I need to learn. And all of these things are improved by better processes and understanding how our brain works. And that's why I've always had such an interest in it.
Same, and it's like to bring it into the MTG world where a lot of people are not exposed to that, a lot of content. And I'm excited. And like you and Jerry said on the game podcast, there's probably, you were thinking about doing it bi-weekly, but there's probably likely enough to get you going and excited about to talk every week, especially with an expert in the field.
Yeah, maybe when we get like 40 episodes in, we'll be like, we should have slowed down a little bit. But I'm telling you, we have a stack of episodes to do and tons of stuff to talk about, and all these new formats we want to try out. There's going to be awesome stuff coming out as the weeks go on, and I'm not worried about having enough content at all. We have plenty to talk about, and Jonathan is so just good at what he does and cares so much about his profession too. Like, he's one of those people who's really invested in what he does and really believes in his mission. And that just leads to infinite topics. And at times it's just like, I just want to shut up and hear him talk. He has so much to offer. I feel like I'm benefiting a tremendous amount by participating in this cast. So
sweet. I'm looking forward to hearing more of what you end up doing with Jerry and with Jonathan as well. So let's get that down to standard. I can still hear your voice in my head talking about how Jerry was like, just play the best deck, and you're like, I'm pretty sure that there's other decks that offer better EV spots. And I think you may have convinced him near the end. But Andy, we'll go to you. What have you been preparing for this upcoming RPTQ in Toronto?
I have played every single tier 1 to 2 deck in preparation, trying to see if there's anything I like, or at least just trying to figure out the decks enough to the point where I figure out like what is going to be good against them and what they're going to naturally be good against, and how I could possibly position myself to beat the best deck, or whether or not I just have to play the best deck in perhaps a way to tune to beat the mirror while also still having game against other stuff. So lately I have a horrible love affair with Teferi. It's one of my favorite cards that I've ever played with. It just feels backbreaking whenever you win with it. So I think I've spent more time than I should have preparing with every possible Teferi deck known to man. Like, I've played blue, white, red. I've played Esper. I've played tons of Bant Fog. I've tried it all in an attempt to kind of figure out if I can play Teferi at the RPTQ and not be upset with myself. But what time and time keeps happening is that I'll either lose to like Chandra, or I'll lose to Glintsleep Siphoner when my answers don't line up quite right. And then it frustrates me to the point where I'm not sure what to play. And then I'm like, all right, I'll play these decks. And then maybe because I'm so built with frustration, I lose with them all. I've lost with everything. Everything imaginable I've lost with. But I think the front runners are to play Bant Fog, just black red and maybe blue white. Those are, and actually blue black controls is up there, but I likely won't play it. But those three are the big three for me right now, and I'm still just trying to figure out some other things to see if I can decide which one I like, or whether I'm just going to play a deck and hate it while I do it.
Bryan, can Bryan offer some insight to help you narrow your choice down?
Well, I think I feel a lot like Andy does, where, I mean, Teferi is just such an absurd Magic card. And the decks surrounding Teferi are very, very good. They're like right there. And in fact, I played an LCQ for the RPTQ here. I haven't been PPTQing. I'm just over the system. Like, I'm not participating anymore. But Mox Boarding House, which is like 5 minutes down the road from me and is a tremendous, tremendous store that I really like playing at, had the LCQ for the Seattle RPTQ. So I was happy to go play that. And I lost in the top 8. I played blue-white control, Jonathan Rossum's list, card for card. I just trusted him. He's played the deck a ton. I think he understands where things are at right now. And I lost in the top 8. The deck felt good. I felt like I had game against everyone. I never felt like I was out of any games. There's tools there. But it doesn't feel like the best deck. And I played Turbo Fog at GPLA, and I would say the exact same thing. I mean, I made some mistakes at that GP, and if you read my article, you know what I did wrong. So I certainly hindered myself there. But I think that the Teferi decks are very clearly sitting in tier 1.5 now. And I think you can win with them. I think if you've played a ton of games and are comfortable with them and have played no games with red-black or blue-black and don't want to jump ship this late in the game, I get that. That's a defensible choice. You're not throwing away your tournament by playing the Teferi decks. But I do think that the red-based aggro decks and blue-black are probably overall better choices, and they comprise tier 1 right now. So it's a question of what suits you, what suits your playstyle, what suits your time, what suits your practice, all that stuff, and you'll have to make that decision. But yeah, I kind of an open standard in some sense. Like, there is a clear tier 1, but there are other viable options as well. And if you have, clever sideboard plans, or even just well thought out flexible sideboard plans, you can get a lot of equity by choosing a tier 1.5 choice as well.
Yeah, it keeps feeling like Teferi is like a 12 out of 10 card in a 8 out of 10 deck, and I get trapped by how insane Teferi is. That's basically how I feel every time I lose with those decks, is that, like, Disallow sucks. That card is awful. And Teferi is insane, but, like, so many of the cards that go around it are bad and situational. The thing is, when it's running on all cylinders, it's unbeatable. But
yeah, Disallow sucks, and the 2-mana counter spells are variable. They're either insane or the wrong card. So it's got a lot of you need a lot to go right to succeed with those decks.
Andy, you feeling? Does it narrow your choice a little? Does it give you a bit of a sense?
Like, it's probably making me, like, so I've played a ton of blue-black mid-range, but I don't know what it is in this format that's leading me to feel like this, but I don't like it as much as I used to. Maybe I think a lot of it came down to when people were proposing different sideboard plans than me, and I just started to trust them because I thought, okay, these people are likely better than me, or at least know the deck better than me. I'll trust their sideboard plans. And I started to lose a lot more. And I'm not sure if that's because my decision is better, or if it's just the way I play the games tend to work out better with certain cards still in my deck. And one that comes to mind the most is, I often, before seeing everyone tell me to board Champion of Wits out, I kept Champion of Wits in against everything. And then all these Chain Whirler decks, I would get Chain Whirler or whatever, and then I would bring back to Champion of Wits, and that's how I'd win all my games with blue-black mid-range. But then everyone told me to board them out, and then now I'm boarding them out, and I feel like I'm getting caught without enough removal, or without enough speed bumps, or without my draws being smooth enough. So I get caught in a weird spot there. And maybe it's because I just need the comfort of the champion with smoothing out my draw, or the inevitability for me when I'm playing the games. But that's when I started to lose the most with blue-black.
All right. Hope you figure it out, Andy. And right now I'm going to introduce, for the first time ever on the First Strike podcast, really excited to have Eduardo Sajgalik on the show. Someone who's notable. I don't know if this wiki is correct, for being on 3 different national teams. Is that correct, Eduardo?
Yeah. Okay. So one of those is a semi-technicality, I guess, because it's like England and the United Kingdom, but I also have Canada. So, you know, I at least try to do like different borders as much as I can.
2 Pro Tour top 8s, current Platinum Pro, and now the newly appointed, I don't know the official title, but you put community.
It's all right. Community consultant is like the actual like business I'm trying to build.
Right.
But like it's pro player consultant, I believe, is the like title Wizards is going for here.
Right. I wasn't sure it was pro player, organized play.
It's all good. It's all good.
And a bunch of pro points. Someone that could be in contention for sure in a Hall of Fame someday. Super happy to have you on, Eduardo. And you're going to be doing some coverage this upcoming weekend.
Yeah. So Grand Prix Richmond and then Detroit the weekend after. So I'm looking forward to like talking about 3 different constructed formats in a row. That's always exciting. Yeah. Start with Legacy, Standard, and then go move on to Modern. It goes really fast.
So I really want people to know more about you, and I've got inside sources around Canada, everywhere, and one of my sources tell me that you make amazing fajitas. Can you confirm or deny that?
I don't know if they're like amazing, but one of the things with the testing team was I noticed essentially every time we were traveling to the US to prep for a tournament, you know, we go for a week, and I noticed we were just like not eating well, right? Like we'd order takeout, instant pizzas, whatever garbage there was. And it was for me, it was having an adverse effect on testing because people were wasting time and they were like not up to shape when they were testing right after. So one thing I started doing was, well, we were lucky in Minneapolis where we had an actual like good food court with like food from everywhere. So it was really good there. But in Richmond, we didn't have that. So our testing house, I became like the cook for the house. So like I would do all the lunches and dinners. And yeah, fajitas is like one of the dishes I enjoy doing. I make my own guacamole and all that stuff. So I enjoy it, and apparently the team did too.
Where did you learn how? Is it all self-taught?
Yeah, I mean, well, like my mom used to cook at home all the time, and I would learn. And then I kind of, after university, like I lived on my own, and like I would teach myself different recipes to try to learn. So I like doing a lot of ABC cooking, where like I'll have a protein, some starch that can be like quinoa, pasta, rice, potatoes, and then like some vegetables. And I like combining those 3 like cores, and then like making a meal out of whatever makes sense.
All right. Like, do you know how I learned about these famous fajitas?
No, we'll go for it.
I've got some sources. What happened? Shout out to Emily.
Oh, Emily. Okay, sure. Yeah. So for those who don't know, my girlfriend works at Face to Face, so someone's on the inside there.
Bryan, what about you, Bryan? Have you thought about like optimized food when it comes to tournaments?
It's tough for me because I'm a vegetarian, so convention center food is usually deep fried garbage chicken. Even if you were to have a salad, there's usually meat in the salad. So it's really tough. I try to just like get a good breakfast, bring a ton of almonds usually with me during the day, eat Cliff Bars, things like that, which aren't really great, but you take what you can get. And it's hard. It really is. Magic tournaments are just not set up well for being able to properly get nutrition and, take good care of yourself. And that's one of the real downsides about like the Magic travel grind for me is I don't like how little emphasis I can put on like my routine things, my food, my exercise, things like that, which are important to me when I'm in my own environment, and just go to absolute poop when I'm out in the Magic community. So it's tough. It's a tough thing to balance.
Eduardo, do you bring that same type of balance, like not just your Pro Tours, but at the GPs as well?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll echo Bryan. I'm not vegetarian myself, but I have a nut allergy. So like, unfortunately, like those two things do not combine well. Because he's right, almonds are a really good nutrition source, and there's a lot of other nuts I would recommend for that. But yeah, like something that, you know, like when I was younger, I mean, I would like do these things, right? Like I would eat convention center food. Got a bit older, I started being a little more careful. So like convention centers usually have a salad option. Like I go for whatever grilled chicken salad they have, because that's like the best option I have. But recently, like I know my digestive system gets like bad because it's not just the food itself. It's also you get less sleep overall. You stress out a lot more because you're in more high pressure situations. And on a constant basis, right? There's no real break, so to speak. So yeah, your like whole system gets shot. Like I'll drink roughly 2 to 3 times more water on like a day 2 of a GP compared to like a normal day in my life. Just because like I won't get that water from food because it's erratic, and like yeah, it's one thing like self-care in tournaments. I do wonder like at what point we have to stop this dialogue of like, you know, as a player, you should take care of yourself. I think that's like one aspect, but the second aspect, like if like at Pro Tours, there's lunch breaks. Part of that is because you can't expect coverage or the crew to like just be on all the time. So they need like a lunch break. And at the PT, you get a half-hour lunch break after round 3 usually. And the thing is, you know, most people finish earlier, so that's your lunch break. It's at least half an hour. It could be a little longer. I don't know if that can be implemented somewhere like at other levels, like at GPs or RPTQs, but because like the days could still be long. But it's a dialogue to have. This, you know, this dialogue of we shouldn't necessarily force this harm on bodies, not because some people just don't have the stamina, and that rebutes people from participating and partaking in tournaments because they can see that they have to like go all the way. And some people may want a more relaxed experience. And I think that's why we're seeing like so many of the side event packages picking up. It's because you're like, oh, well, I can play 3 hours, take a break, play 3 hours later, like at my leisure. And I think that's just a way healthier approach than like the main event at a Grand Prix. Like the main event at Grand Prix is just nuts. Like you play from 9 to 6, no breaks. And then after you have the whole evening, it just feels very weird overall for me.
I agree with that. Andy, you bring a balanced breakfast to all your tournaments?
That was more of a half joke of I eat breakfast and then I don't eat until I leave the tournament hall because I get like stressed out of the thought of leaving a tournament hall, and then I get stressed out at the thought of paying $14 for a crappy hamburger. So I actually just typically just eat and then I wait. But I've actually played a PTQs back in the day with lunch breaks in them.
Oh, yeah. I think I've played some old style PTQs that had a small lunch break in the middle in Montreal, right? Like there were some,
in Montreal.
There were some, but those don't exist anymore. Eduardo, let's get right down to you being one of the coverage guys. It's really curious for me because one of the things that I felt the game lacks in terms of good coverage people is that person that knows what he's talking about in terms of the competitive standpoint. And it's usually hard to find those people because those people are usually actively playing. They're playing the game and they want the glory of playing. So how did you get on to be one of the commentators? Well, first of all, that's the first question. Let's go with that.
Sure. And it's before I like move on, right? It's not just me, right? There's also people like Paul Rietzel who like gets excellent feedback as well. So this discussion isn't just about me in a way. It's about how the coverage team like got on board, like essentially talent, right? Reed Duke as well. I mean, there's the big segment coming up at GP Richmond with Reed Duke, who's doing both playing and covering. And I think there's a will there from the coverage team to like try to seek out people that essentially, it's not just know what is going on in a match of Magic, but also can communicate it well to the audience. And that's a really difficult skill set to combine. And because of that, they're kind of, I think there's been this reliance on trying to have these people step up, because personally, like, I asked. That was fundamental. Like, if you don't ask, I don't think there's a chance you get on. So unless you're like top. So it's important to ask if that was the thing. And then when I started doing it, the thing is, like, I got a bit of practice from doing my own stream, and I guess I have a bit of background in like doing plays and other shows and things like that. So that's where, and public speaking. So that's where that background comes from. And I thoroughly enjoy covering games of Magic, because my tournament Magic experience is extremely variable. It's quite stressful. While when you're covering, you focus purely on what makes the game enjoyable, and you get to watch a wide variety of gameplay. One of the things actually coming from, I know this might sound off base, but like coming from playing a Hearthstone tournament, was that you have to prepare like 4 different decks. And like that gives you a variety in the gameplay while you play your tournament. And in Magic, sometimes that can be difficult, because you don't get to see as many different strategies as you want, because you're fixed on one. And it's a core part of the experience, right? But when you're doing coverage, that gets thrown out the window totally, and you get to like see a bunch of different strategies, players that have totally different approaches to the game. And I think like one of my bigger weaknesses in the game is the actual decision making, but figuring out the decisions I'm pretty good at, and I can communicate that. So that's why I like doing coverages, because it plays to my strengths, and it downplays the weakness, because I don't have to make the decision. The player's going to make it, and I can just discuss the merit, basically. I mean, that's my view on it, and I really enjoy it. And yeah, I think, like, honestly, like, even like just aside from me, I think like the people on board have been like just much better this year. Like when I see like people commenting on Wizards of the Coast coverage, it's a lot more positive the last year and a half than it was like 3 or 4 years ago. So it's like night and day in terms of how the community reacts, and that to me is already great. I love the fact that it's improved. I know they're working hard on improving it in the future. Like, yeah, basically.
Yeah, you're right that there have been other players that have stepped up. But I've like every time I've appreciated their coverage, and I've appreciated every time you've been on. Wasn't it a tough decision to make? Like, I think some people just love playing too much, but for you, was it tough to just want to cover Richmond and not just want to play it?
Yeah, and I mean I can talk about like what the sacrifice there is, right? Because like I'm missing, like I know I'm platinum right now, but I'm not playing another tournament as platinum. Like that is ending. So I will be silver by 1 pro point. And Richmond and Detroit are tournaments where I could have chased those pro points. So I'm making that conscious decision to go, okay, this is going to happen, and this is just reality. That said, I'm still going to pursue pure Magic. So because of the cycle system, I'm going to probably, I'm like 80 to 90% on this. I haven't booked the flight, but it would be like, there's like a weird flight I can do, like Warsaw, Tokyo for Shizuoka, and then back to Liverpool, which is like I think 1,500 Canadian plus like whatever the travel is, and like that would be like a fun travel, and that does free GPs plus 2 in North America. So as long as I can export 2 of those 5 GPs I do, or do something at the Pro Tour, that would get me gold because I got the Team Series invite for Pro Tour Atlanta. Then I would get like gold for 2 more cycles, and then I would get like an invite. I'm sure like I carry that on. So, yeah, we're finally seeing the benefits of the cycle system as well. Because like for a year we got like all the drawbacks, and like now it's finally shifting to a point where you can get the advantages. And I was lucky because I hit platinum to start off, so I like hit the highest points. So I was like already advantaged in that sense. But I think it was the cycle system has been really bad for the current year to get some people on board at gold level, because they have to build from the ground up as they had last year, but their levels last less long. So they get like the drawbacks of the new system and of the old system at the same time, which means that this year's been really rough. And I know like a lot of people that would be pro are not sure if they want to continue. And I think that's part of the reason as well that, you know, Wizards wants to have that discussion with the 3 of us and with the player community in that sense, is they want to figure out a way to improve, you know, like understand how people from different regions feel, and make sure that there's communication beforehand, because it's a lot harder to change something once it's been announced and budgeted.
Bryan, I imagine at your stage as well, you would jump on board with commentating if given the opportunity.
Yeah,
or play.
I mean, if given the opportunity, I think I would probably do it. I feel similarly about my skill set to Eduardo. The actual in the moment decision making, I can waver sometimes, but I'm really good at analyzing why you reach those decision trees and, optimal outcomes, potential outcomes. I do think it's something that probably suits me. And also, I don't play that much Magic now, so I don't have the same kind of, pressure on me as far as maintaining a pro club, or my Magic experience is mostly Magic Online at this point. The pro players club does not offer me anything at this point. I love Magic. I love Pro Tours. I love playing. The grind and trying to eke out meager living doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I do better making content. And I think a lot of people feel similarly, and had their lifestyles not already been shaped around the grind and the attendance at every Pro Tour and going to a bunch of GPs, they might be in the same boat as I am. Because there's issues with pro Magic right now, and that's why I'm really excited to see them engage people like Eduardo to have a chance to work on these issues. And if things change, maybe my position will change as well. But just as it stands now, there's not a lot of incentive for me to pursue a players club level.
All right. We're gonna go around to that. While I have Bryan on, if you can stay on for the rest of the show, I just want to jump straight in before we get into the Pro Tour consulting more. The whole Hall of Fame. Tomorrow's the deadline. Eduardo has already submitted his ballot in alphabetical order. What a nice man! And even got a thanks as a reply for doing so. So, and I want to shout out Eduardo here, because his research has impacted who I'm going to put on my ballot as well. And according to his Twitter, the email he sent had Tsuyoshi Ikeda, Seth Matfield, Brad Nelson, Chris Pikula, and Li Shi-Tian. And Pikula is actually someone I'm also, outside of reading, I had to ask Bryan, I had to ask some of my older generation people that I really regard, BDM and Mike Flores. Eduardo, what convinced you? Because of course he's the one that somehow, if you don't vote for him, you got a bunch of people. Why? Or your ballot is crap. You shouldn't be able to. Like, it doesn't matter because you don't have Chris Pikula. But you came around. You wanted some concrete thing that he did. Like, what did he actually do outside of, like, hey, being against cheating? So really interested in what really swayed you ultimately.
Right, sure. And I'm more happy to talk specifically, I guess, about Pikula, because for me, Lee and Seth are like world-class players that deserve to be in the Hall of Fame as far as I'm concerned. And Ikeda and Brad are people that I support this year in that sense. Pikula is a different case. And one thing you have to understand, and this is kind of, this is going to be a little longer, but like the setup is, I'm coming from outside, and I see everybody, unfortunately, a large, or at least a very vocal portion of Pikula's supporters are unfortunately that. They're extremely vocal. They're very unwavering, and they just say, you have to vote for Pikula, or I don't know, cats are going to die, something horrible. And that rebukes me automatically, and I think it stops a lot of people because it's very zealous. And I come from a culture where my parents, are immigrants in that sense, and they fled. Like, my grandparents fled the Red Army. My mom was under Franco in Spain. They went to Latin America, where a bunch of other stuff went down. And like, the thing is, like, my family is more than tired of like that situation. Like, vote for this person. Like, where I come from, like, vote for this person is super dangerous. Like, it's seen as like an error, like to take a stance like that without trying to justify, without trying to research. So like, that was like ingrained. So At the same time, the thing is, I had a chance to talk a little bit with Chris, and he's somebody who's very mild-mannered, right? Like the supporters are one thing, but Chris shouldn't be punished because his supporters are overzealous. I think that is wrong. Like fundamentally, you shouldn't punish someone for the actions of somebody else is taking in their name. So I took the time, and I was like, I had the same concerns a lot of people have, which is what did he actually do? Because I just hear he like went against cheating. And I mean, that's cool, but like I have other stances, but that doesn't necessarily mean I should have a lifetime award achievement in that lifetime award in that sense that the Hall of Fame is. So I looked it up, and I just asked the question publicly, like, can somebody concretely tell me? And I got a lot of great responses. I got people that obviously tell me I should vote for him or whatever, but again, ignore those people. But I had a few replies about specific things that Pikula had done. Like, for example, him and his team had specifically talked to judges and gotten people disqualified for cheating at different tournaments. Like, they actively went out and located and got rid of cheaters. He was one of the people behind the limited deck registration sheet, as far as I could tell. And they fundamentally changed the culture. They shifted the needle in that sense because they were outspoken. Like we're talking, like the way to think about this is like they were protesters against a broken system with corruption. So like the act of protesting was already in and of itself like very powerful. And they were actually protesting, like as far as I can tell at tournaments, they were like screaming, like, take them down, take these people down, this can't stand anymore. But I think the thing that cemented it for me was that somebody linked me to a very, very old internet post, like 1997, and there was a very young Pikula that posted there, and it was very aggro, like very outspoken. But combined with the rest of the stories I got, plus seeing the stance that Pikula had taken there in 1997, I could tell that the stance and attitude that Pikula had, plus the actions I had heard, corresponded to the same person. Like, I could conceive how this person in 1997 became that person down the line in 98 to 2001, 2002, that helped clean up the game immensely. And then that's what convinced me. It was the fact that I got that he wasn't just the only leader, but he led a group of people to protest this, like actively protest at tournaments. Like that, like it's inconceivable today because it doesn't make sense, right? Like I started in 2002. I haven't seen anything akin to a protest at a tournament. Like it just hasn't happened. Nobody's been like, people have been annoyed, but nobody's been like out in arms, like take this person down. It just doesn't make sense. And then when I think about it, I'm like, I never would have joined the game if that was how it was. Like, it would not have interested me. Like, what's the point? And I think that's like why I fundamentally voted for him, is I realized the process, but the process was super important because his results, while good, they're not like the same caliber as other people in the Hall of Fame. And for a player, results just super important. And that's reality. That's why a lot of pro players don't vote for Pikulas, because it's not that they're like against integrity or something. It's because they feel like the results that Pikula has exhibited are just below the threshold of what you require. But in my view, a lot of the pro players in the Hall of Fame or that we have today would not be in the game if it wasn't for his actions. And that's why I ultimately ended up voting for him, was because I got to see the process.
Eduardo, would it be fair to say that, I don't know about you though, but would you have voted for him if his results were poorer than they are currently?
Okay, so he has 3 Pro Tour top 8s, and I believe, I might be wrong on his median. Was it something like 55? It was really high. No, it wasn't that high. Median 55, like his 3-year median, I think, was 55. But that was like when Pro Tours were newer. So like I don't put like an X2 multiplier, but like I put an X 1.5 or something, because Pro Tours back then I think had 200-ish people. They jumped quickly to 3 and 4, but like they were less people. So the thing is, like, modern Pro Tour, he may not. So like if you had 1 less top 8, like it becomes to the point where probably no, because the results are just not at a caliber. I think when you have free Pro Tour top 8s and you were like near the top or one of the best of your era, then for me it's like the line, right? Like 3 and 4 are like the line, and you start thinking about other stuff. I think 2 and below, you have to be like beyond exceptional. Someone like, I think Shouta had 1 or 2, like when he got inducted, it was like nuts but like he got like 2 more since or something. Owen also didn't have that many for like how good he was. Like, and this stuff got rectified. Well, here's the thing though. My belief is that if Chris got into the Hall of Fame and came back on the Pro Tour, I don't think he would be the caliber of player that would be able to get a top 8 beyond, say, a good active player nowadays. And I don't mean this as a knock against him, because we're voting on his resume. But then because I consider that as a player, I basically go like, if there was one less top 8, I maybe wouldn't have voted for him. But I think with Free, I go, okay, Free is like where I start looking at somebody and go, okay, what else was there? And I think the package works. He was dominant in his era. He wasn't like top like Finkel or Kai were, but he still was good. No question about it.
Bryan, you were very vocal with me when I asked your opinion. Is there what's your perspective on Pikula? Like, he's a lock for you, one of your few locks on the ballot if you had a vote.
Yeah, I have issues. I mean, we talked about this last year. I remember being on the show and talking about it. I have issues with the Hall of Fame conceptually. I think the barrier to entry is too low. I think it's a hall of great players as it stands right now, not taking anything away from their accomplishments. They should all be extremely proud. They're all far better Magic players than I will ever be. But a Hall of Fame feels like something different to me. And when we did this a year ago, my Hall of Fame would have had 2 people, Kai and John. Now I would have 3 people, Kai, John, and PV. That's where my Hall of Fame sits. I realize that's different from the Hall of Fame we are currently faced with. But to me, the people who are crossing the threshold of quote unquote famous, and I understand that's not exactly what the Hall of Fame is about, but to me, it should be. I don't want people who are in the heyday of their careers making it into the Hall of Fame. That's what Owen felt like. That's what Seth feels like. And I don't think that's what the Hall of Fame is for. It's kind of like this weirdo super qualification thing that like now you never have to worry about falling off again. And that's what's being positioned for. So step 1 is I would like to see the guaranteed invites removed. I think you should be granted 1 invite a year to use at the Pro Tour of your choosing. And that's a awesome way to pay respect to the people who are in the Hall of Fame. And then there should probably be like a Hall of Fame event, probably at induction weekend, where it's a Hall of Fame only tournament, and you can cover that. And it's awesome and exciting, and a chance to see all these people. You know, you put off $100,000 and that's high enough EV where people are interested. And I understand I'm playing with fictional money right now that I get to throw around with no consequence. So, you know, that has its own set of problems. But this is all a long-winded way of saying, if I were voting on the Hall of Fame, I would vote for 2 people this year. One would be Pikula. I think Eduardo did an excellent job of explaining exactly why he belongs in. I mean, he is a fundamental difference maker in the history of the Pro Tour. He's a figure. He's the meddling mage. He is responsible for the game being in the state it's in today, and has certainly earned respect for that. And then my second vote is a vote surely rooted in bias. But part of the thing about bias is that an element of bias is an access to information, right? So our bias isn't only shaped by what we want to happen, it's also shaped by what we have access to. And in some cases, that access gives us things that other people don't get to see. And the second person on my ballot would be Jerry. Now, obviously, I get the problems with me saying that because we work together, we have a relationship, we're good friends. But when you're talking about famous and when you're talking about what you've done for the game, Jerry has been producing content for 11 years. He's raised thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for charity. By the way, his last charity auction just wrapped up 3 days ago, raised like $3,000 for the for suicide prevention. He's raised tons of money for Planned Parenthood. I forget what his second auction was for, but he's raised tens and thousands of dollars in the name of Magic, gotten mainstream media coverage for his efforts on behalf of Planned Parenthood. You know, he was featured on Kotaku and other media outlets, and is just generally painting Magic in this super favorable light. And then I see the way he interacts with people at tournaments, and this is what you want out of your Hall of Fame members. He's an ambassador for Magic, and he's a face of Magic, and he has done more to paint Magic in a good light and to use Magic for good than anyone currently playing on the Pro Tour, to my knowledge. Granted, like I said, I have access to some information that people don't see, and I'm sure there's other players who I don't have access to what they're doing on behalf of Magic and what they're doing to improve the game. I get that. But just based on what I've seen, what I've heard, those are my two choices. They cross that threshold of fame. They've contributed enough to the game over a long enough period of time that I think that's who belongs in. And you know, that's not to take anything away from Lee, from Seth, from Mark Herberholz, all completely defensible choices that I think everyone can make. And, you know, the Japanese players, Ken Yukihiro or Akeda, I don't know enough about them. But again, to me, there's this threshold of fame, right? So Kai was a foreign player, PV, a foreign player. They're so great, you know about them. They've reached that threshold of fame. And the fact that I am not local to their community and don't have the same level of access, they've transcended that because they are that good. And that's part of my argument for the Hall of Fame being much smaller than it is. I mean, there's certainly Japanese players who they were right on my threshold of that 3-person Hall of Fame. There's a bunch of Japanese players sitting in the 4th, 5th, 6th slots ready to enter. They've overcome that kind of Western bias to Magic coverage that I think does exist. I mean, it's indisputable that coverage is focused around English-speaking players, and there's way more tournaments in English-speaking countries. So that also factors into everything, not denying that. But I think that's transcendable. And I don't know. I mean, this is all moot. I don't have a vote, right? So this is just me freestyling and saying what I want to say. And there's a lot less stakes in terms of me putting forth this argument because it doesn't actually determine any outcomes. It's just how I feel. People are welcome to disagree with it.
There was a Reddit thread about because of all the drama on Twitter. Someone had said talking about one specific candidate. I think it was more. Okay, it was against about Pikula, and one guy wrote, "He's the only candidate who's come out of this week not looking terrible." And I replied, "Jerry," and someone was like, "Fair enough." I think Jerry's been able to steer away from all the controversy and all the drama.
There is a problem with what's going on right now. There's a marked problem. This looks horrible. And when you're not, so whether I'm actively engaged with pro Magic right now, I still have ties to it. And I know the stories. I know the backstories. I know all the stuff that's going on. To me, I get what's happening here. But if I didn't have that level of knowledge, that perception, that inside information, how awful does this look to someone who's like a PPTQ player trying to make their first pro tour? I mean, think of the impression they're getting from this whole situation. And this isn't saying anyone's take is wrong or there's not merit into trying to clean up the game, but just the vitriol and the general tone and the approach to how things have been done this season have been dangerous. And it's not been a good look for Magic over the past few weeks. I think that's pretty clear, regardless of what side of any argument you fall on. You have to admit this is not a good look for Magic right now.
Eduardo, you fully, wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, I mean, Bryan's hit on the nose, as have a lot of people. Essentially, and just to be clear, there's a number of pro players that they get in touch with me and share that feeling, right? That this is just not okay for the game. It's not okay for their friends either, because like, for example, Lee had to write that piece defending himself, and the thing was, one of the main reasons he did that is because his friends are getting attacked. I know Lee, he would not have written that if it was just him. He wouldn't have bothered. But the fact that somebody that cared about him tried to defend him and got attacked, and that was like enough to trigger him. And that piece went down well, which I was very happy with. That was actually a really nice positive. But I think that the community has, like, not pro community, but like the overall community has gotten to the point where Bryan is, which is, this is a terrible look for the game. It looks awful. Like, unless, I mean, it might be funny from a soap opera perspective until you realize that like actual people are behind this. And as far as I'm concerned, there's kind of this vibe of, I've seen this happen in online communities where I've done work, and it feels to me like online harassment. It's not from an individual in particular, just to be clear. I don't think that anyone has targeted someone enough for me to say that it was online harassment. But I think that the whole like batch ends up being that way. And I know that some people have had a hard time with this. And I think that needs to fundamentally change. Because I know that for me, there's a difference between people that are airing their disagreements with certain players now because they want to harm them, or because they want to find a solution to a problem that they were not able to find by other means. And those are two different groups. Group one is something that needs to be combated. It's just not okay, like at all, to try to assassinate someone's character because you dislike them. But point two is a much more interesting one, which is, and I've gotten that from many people, which is, we don't feel that the system was able to solve the problem that we had with this player. It may be a long-term perceived issue. It may be a specific ruling. I put a lot more credit in long-term issues, because one game of Magic could go one way or another. Who knows what happens a lot of the time. It's really hard to say, well, in this scenario, this player did this. And like, well, there's no point in really arguing, because you won't really know the truth. Like, the idea is like a combination of things leads to this problem. And my personal view, and what I guess, I don't know how much in the consultant side of things this will happen, but it's probably something I will bring up if there is an opportunity, which is looking at how we deal with things that are relatively close to not cheating, but have tangible associations or can transcend into it too easily. And for me, those two things that I would like to look into are slow play and angle shooting. Slow play specifically because it's way too close to stalling, and intent is like literally the only thing you can do to separate those two. So I want to recheck how we deal with slow play and ask that question, and ask how can we involve the conversation around slow play around, for someone that is egregiously slow over a number of matches, like how do you look into that? And the second thing for me on angle shooting is, do we really want to accept as a community like this kind of thing? Like for me, it's stuff like, because you can't blame the player, right? Like for me, something that comes into my mind is like Pivy Needle on Borborygmos. Like that was, like I would never blame the player that tries to pull that off, but we as a community should not accept that that is the norm or okay in general, because it leads to too many situations where people might cross into something else, and it makes it much harder to try to catch out people, and it fosters an environment where you're trying to win at all costs rather than enjoying the game that you're sitting down to play. And I think these two things have to evolve. And it's because I'm also a big believer, if a system is broken, you shouldn't just try to short-term solution your way around it. You should try to fix the root problem and cause, because that's the only way that problem stops working. And right now, for example, there's too much incentive to sort of air this dirty laundry during Hall of Fame season, because it's the same as if you were looking for sort of justice or something to happen here. So like the people that wanted, for not good reasons, but like reasons that are personal to them and important to them and they value, and for bad reasons, you know, trying to assassinate someone's character, like the strategy is the same. So you can't tell one from the other, and you can't discredit people. And our goal isn't to discredit people, but it's to protect the people that are being targeted by stories that honestly like are probably in a lot of cases just not true, unfortunately. Some are, and because we can't separate truth from fiction, like it creates an environment where you just distrust everyone, and that's good for no one down the line.
Man, Eduardo, man, it just makes me happier by the word that you're one of the chosen consultants. You had Andy, you want to jump in?
I don't have too much interesting to say other than, like, I feel the same way. Like, the first thing I was thinking when you started bringing up the Hall of Fame talk is, like, a bad look, and then everyone said this is a bad look, and that's exactly how I felt about it. Like, when it all started, I was like, ooh, some juicy Twitter drama. This will be exciting. And then now I just legitimately get upset when I open Twitter and see all this, and I just close Twitter. I don't want to look at all this, all these players that I love, like, and they are some of the reasons that I love to play this game. Is like, these are the players you look up to. Just like getting in these really, really petty arguments and these petty things, and then they move the goalposts when, like, someone calls them out on them calling someone else out, and then they change the narrative to be like, well, actually, this is what I really am worried about. And it's just, it looks so bad, and I really can't wait for the day after tomorrow when people hopefully stop talking about it.
On the topic of slow play, let me pull this up. Edward, you had commented, you had tweeted back at this, so definitely want you on here to talk about it. Oh yeah, here we go. So MTG_Dash posted up a nice little table of stats, and in the picture, Bryan, I don't know if you've seen this, he highlights in yellow Gabriel Nassif with percentage of matches that timed out, 4.3%. Matches that timed out, win percentage, 93.8%. So he's won basically almost all of the games that go to timeout. But there's a lot of caveats, so people jumping in quick conclusions should go check the post, because the author of this post himself says, like, maybe it's because, you know, Gabe plays slow decks that generally win game one, and of course, if he's the better player, he's more likely to win that, especially if it's a deck that's better positioned to take down game one. So it does not necessarily mean that he's a stalling cheater. So there's a lot of caveats that the author of this post goes into. So I would recommend checking that out.
KYT, does the author say where the data comes from? Because that was the first thing that jumps to my mind. Where are they getting these numbers from?
If I can interject, I don't know necessarily where he might, but MTG Yellow Project is usually like when I was looking at, like, say, win rates for Hall of Fame votes, that's where I went. I mean, the data is not 100% perfect on there, especially when I looked at EK. There were like 10 Pro Tours that mysteriously disappeared, which is a large number. I don't know what happened there, but a lot of the data from 2000 plus is relatively accurate, so you can just look on there. He just pulls the stats. It's like, I've been very impressed by the work there, actually. Like, between, I wish I remembered his name now. Please look him up. Damn it. Sorry. I'll look it up and mention it later. But yeah, him and Sene One, they both, like, have helped a lot in terms of that stats and community approach. But he just pulls all the stats, so people can just Control F and search, like,
but do those stats keep track of the game count in matches you've won?
Yeah,
like, because it has him winning 1-0.
Yeah, because they do that on the stand, like on the results page for GPs. Like, if someone wins 1-0, like the judges actually insert 1-0, so like that goes online, and if you're data pulling, that'll get data pulled too. It should, at least. Yeah.
Yep.
So he does mention mtgeloproject.net. Not for me, it wasn't a surprise seeing Nassif because of his reputation as someone that's ultra slow, and there's even him on stream, like, or videos where he loses on time. So he's notoriously slow. But Eduardo, you tweeted back, and yeah, you mentioned it. You also mentioned just before this question was this topic was, you might look at different aspects of slow play and how to improve that. So what is this data? What did it tell you?
All right. So I mean, that data for me is not that vitally. It's nice, but it's not that vitally interesting, because the number of matches where this happens is statistically low. Like, Nassif is the statistical anomaly where you get the highest amount of results and it's still low. So Plus, Nassif notoriously likes playing control style decks. So, like, it makes sense. He plays slowly and he likes to play decks that take a long time. So, of course, that happens. But I think Nassif is a good example because there was something that came up in I can't remember what match, GP Nationals or Pro Tour match between Nassif and I think Pierre Dajan. I'm not 100% on the opponent, but the clock was winding down and they had like 7 or 10 minutes and Nassif mulliganed down to 4. Now, the thing is, Nassif is a notoriously slow player, but because he's mulliganing to 4, there's an argument if he wasn't who he was that you could accuse that player of stalling. And that to me, like, is where all these problems come from. Is the fact is Nassif was not called out on stalling because he's a notoriously slow player. And I think that's fair, right? Like, he is actually just playing slowly. He happens to mulligan to 4, but it looks super bad. Like, as far as I'm concerned, like, you could not be able to tell the difference between him trying, like, if he did, like, that's horrible, but like, there would be no way for you to tell. And I think that's where we need to be better at the slow play aspect. Like, and I don't want to form my mind too much about this, and everything you're hearing here is speculative at this point because maybe I can't change the needle on this. All I'm going to have is discussions and ask the question there and see how that system can be changed. It might be after like a couple of months, my conclusion is, okay, well, we are where we are, and there's a reason for that. But one thing I wanted to figure out was if there's a way, because for me, if somebody is taking on average 65, 70% of the clock in their matches compared to their opponents, and there's no rationale to, like, the format isn't like blistering fast and then they just decided to play the one complicated deck of the format. Question, well, this player is probably getting an advantage because they're just taking more time. Like, if I play chess and I have a 35-minute clock and my opponent has a 20-minute one, like, I have an advantage. Like, that's just a clear-cut advantage. But the assumption of slow play is that it's unintentional. And I believe that most of these players that are playing slowly are doing so unintentionally. They just like to think and they go multi-levels deep. I know that Nassif goes really deep in his thought process. And there's a time and a place for that. But not every match in Magic is that time and place. And there's a question for me. Well, for example, a penalty for marked cards pattern when it's assumed to be innocent, like, I got one at the Pro Tour because after checking the sleeves with my judge at the start of the day, they rechecked and said that my sideboard was marked. PSA, shuffle your sideboard in between rounds. I forgot that, but that's advice I got given 15 years ago, and for that tournament, I was stressed out and forgot it. But and I got game loss because the idea is that they want to make sure that you couldn't have possibly gained any advantage with marked cards pattern. And I think that philosophy, I'm wondering as a discussion, should that philosophy extend to slow play? Should it be there that, well, if this player is taking 65 to 70% of their matches, the thing is they're probably getting an advantage, even if it's unintentional. So what's the penalty to make them realize that this is not acceptable? And maybe that answer is a game loss. You get to say to them, well, look, because you've taken this much time, you have unfair, like, you've been given an advantage. So we have to rectify the situation for the integrity of the tournament. And that might be a game loss. It could be a game loss between rounds because you've observed this player for 2 rounds and you're like, you've played slowly both rounds consistently. But I don't know what the answer is because your previous biases are going to come into play, right? Because you're like, well, this player's slow. And yeah, and there's way more into this topic. I think PV did an excellent job framing the basis of the topic where a lot of players, like top players that are not like LSV or Shouted that play lightning fast all the time, or Owen, will like be super fast on like the obvious stuff, like land or elf will be like 5 seconds, but then like on a super complicated turn, they might go into the type. I know Mike Sigris does this. I know I do this myself, and I know that a lot of players do this, right? Like the situation's complicated, you want to take time, but what we're trying to, and I play Storm in Legacy, right? Like there might be a turn where I take 4 minutes and then say go, which is awful, but I've because I've tanked on literally what could my opponent have, what do I do, how do I do I go for a draw spell? Like, how do I float my mana? Like, what am I trying to play around? But, like, that thought process carries over to future turns. It's not like it's deleted. So, like, my next turn should be fast, right? And how do you do this is very difficult because you're asking then judge staff to go, well, I can't look at just a single turn. I have to look at a match. And that's why you have to look at the conversation for me overall is I think that playing slowly consistently is damaging the integrity of a tournament. But how do you actually check for that? And that's a very difficult question to answer.
Yeah, some people would argue that it's also really bad to show these slow playing on stream, and it's boring to watch some of these players. Bryan, do you have any solutions that come to mind?
Play the game digitally. I mean, look, if there was a functional way to play Magic digitally, this conversation goes away, and it's answered for us. I was hoping Arena would be that. I don't feel that way currently. Maybe things will change over time. I'm still hopeful. I don't know. Is that direction you want to take Magic? There's always going to be these gray areas as long as we're playing with physical cards, because there's things you just can't, you can't enforce the passing of priorities chess clock type situation. It doesn't work that way. So you need more judge staff, or you need clearer policies or time limits. Like, you know, you can call for clock in poker. You know what I mean? Like, you only have so long to make a decision. You can only take for so long, but that requires enforcement. And again, more judge staff. So there's no clean solution to this. I get the problems with it. I get the problems with habitually slow players, of which I probably would include myself in. Like Eduardo said, if I have a complicated turn, I will go into the tank for as long as it takes for me to figure out everything I want to figure out about that turn until I am asked to make a play, and then I will make my play. Now, that never changes regardless of the situation with the clock. I'm never altering how long I'm taking for a decision based on how much time is left in the round. But if I need the time and I can do so with only getting you need to make a decision, okay, I'm willing to take that much time if I feel it necessary. Is that wrong? Well, I mean, over time, I am probably gaining an advantage by taking more time to make my decisions. That's not my purpose. My purpose is in making the optimal play. But there's no way to kind of take that away from me without more clearly defined rules. And it kind of stinks. Like, it's not the ideal way to proceed with the game. So my cleanest solution is just the digital platform. I don't know that we'll ever see that. And I think it takes away some of the charm of the game too. I mean, there's value in actually playing with your cards, and sitting down with an iPad across from your opponent doesn't have the same type of feel to it. And that stinks. I like physical Magic cards. They're cool. So I don't know where this is going to end. But I agree that there has to be some discussion of it, at least some kind of, I mean, especially when you talk about players who are like Nassif, like Seth is another person who people are concerned about his pace of play. They're at every Pro Tour. They're in the feature match area constantly. I mean, it's not like these players don't play the vast majority of their matches under the watchful eye of a judge. And despite that, they haven't accumulated enough slow play warnings for it to, you know, raise to a level of suspension or anything like that. There just hasn't been any consequence. So the assumption, and I think correctly so, is that they're still operating within the rules, despite the fact that they are taking more clock than their opponents. And they're probably benefiting from it. I don't know. I don't know how you fix that.
Yeah, and I think the digital side is super interesting, by the way. And I think KYT will, I don't know if you're going to continue on that, but like that's another discussion that I think is really fascinating. But I wanted to say, like, on the fact that you were taking like your time on a turn, it's about that holistic approach, right? Because that's fundamentally the only way you can fix the problem, so to speak, is it's not just one turn. Because when you look at the situation from one turn, you start realizing, well, a turn of Magic, I could have seen this at any time. I don't necessarily have all the info, like how complicated is this actual turn and how have they been playing the rest of the time? Because if you take like long on that turn, but then the next three are super, like if you're playing standard and the next three are very fast because you figured out everything like 2 moves in advance, then like for me, you weren't playing slowly. If you take like 3 minutes on one turn, but you're taking 15 seconds on the others because because you've done that thought process, then like holistically for me, that block of time is like, okay, well, they just jammed all their thinking into one and then executed all the actions in a row. And PV's article highlights that. It's okay that somebody takes their time on the decision. What's not okay is that it's consistent, persistent, and then you're doing this all the time. This is why we're not pile shuffling more than once. At Providence for the Grand Prix, I did not see people pile shuffle very often. It was actually a rarity now. the community has gone away from this. They realize that like it's just not something good for the game. And I think there is a willingness to evolve, but it's a very difficult topic. And you're right. As long as you're not digital, how do you actually solve the problem? And I don't think the solution is to suspend, but it's to tell these people, well, you're gaining an advantage. So we have to say that you are, and you're not intentional. But because you have gained an advantage, we need to negate that. And you can't negate that with a warning. And I mean, I faced a friend in the final of UK Nationals in 2011, and he got a game loss for slow play in an untimed finals. But it was merited. There's no question where was this a real. It was just that the judge finally went, this is too much. This needs to stop now. You've played slowly all match. You need to get like an actual game loss. And it's getting that conversation where it's super hard to try to evolve into that direction, because it's a very hard call to make as a judge, because you're basically saying, based on what I saw from the game from just a time perspective, nothing's been wrong, but you've taken too long. So I have to award the game to your opponent. And that can be a big difference maker. And that's a really hard conversation.
Man, I'm trying to think, like, I wonder, as someone who used to play chess, but I do see so many, once I even think it's possible, I see too many problems with it. Logistically, like who's bringing the clock? Like, are they stopping the clock?
Let me give you the cleanest. Let me give you the cleanest suggestion I have, KYT. And this still sucks.
Outside of digital. This
still sucks, but this is the cleanest thing I've ever come up with all the times I've thought of this. You have a set number of seconds to make an in-game action, and you can never exceed that number of seconds. An in-game action defined as playing a spell, making an attack, activating an ability. I wouldn't count tapping mana as an in-game action. You just tap and untap, one land at a time. But you say you only have, I don't know what the correct number is. I'd have to play games and get a feel for if there is actually a correct number. You say you only have 15 seconds you can take before taking an in-game action. And is that abusable? Sure, but that's easier to spot abuse of, right? If I say you have 15 seconds between every action, and then you pay 1 mana, tap your creature with my Icy Manipulator, wait 15 seconds, pay 1 mana, do that. You know what I mean? It's much easier to see where you're purposely stretching to that 15-second threshold. Whereas the kind of complete undefined quote unquote slow play that we have now it's just almost meaningless. It's completely at discretion. So if you had this hard threshold for time for an action, it does something. Now, it would take loads of playtesting that I have not done to see if this is actually feasible. But this is the only thing I've come close to being like, okay, maybe that's clean enough to work. But if you told me there are 10 million flaws with it, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, and one of the flaws I can already think of is an eternal format. There are some like decks that the second they take one action, they're locked into a turn. And I played Storm in Legacy. The second I play a Dark Ritual, that's it. That turn is going one direction. And if I miscounted or screwed up, I'm dead. Like, it's over. Like, and that's the problem. I don't think that's fundamentally feasible. Well, it's a new paradigm under which to play the game, though, right? Like, it's like those decks, their difficulty ramps up tremendously. Like, I know you're a Hearthstone player. Sure. The equation is APM Priest, right? Where like, you know what I mean? But, you're physically limited to completing the action. Right. But in a game of Hearthstone, the key is you're thinking all of this in advance, right? Like, because your combos are most of the combo decks in Hearthstone are very control. They're mostly control combo. They're really control decks that have a combo finish. Pure combo is usually something that the devs for Hearthstone avoid hard and nerf very quickly. So it's usually control combo. And you're playing a control game. So most of the time when you're playing those games, you're taking a long time every turn. But you're always thinking of your combo. You're always thinking what's the lethal damage. And then the second you win, it's actually very quick. So, and you still get that problem, right? So, but the difference with Hearthstone is your opponent can't interrupt what you do. Right. And that's a really key difference. Because when you're trying to think of like, what could my opponent do in this exact spot? And you think there's 5 or 6 different moments they can interrupt you. That's where those long terms come from. If your opponent's tapped out and stuff, like, okay, maybe it's a little easier. But yeah. And, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, how do you, and I think that one of the other conversations is you have to accept that some matches will naturally go to time, because you can't expect everybody to play fast. And you know what? If both players played slow on a game, but it was like that one match, and they both played slow, like I'm okay with it if both are doing this. Like, if there's a reciprocity is the main thing. And
Yeah, that's the main thing for me is like, did the aggro player like forever to start with, but then like the control player is taking a little longer when they're trying to establish control? Like, does it make sense in the flow of the game? And then like once you're in a state of like, you know what's going on, are things moving quickly? Like that's where. But you're right. There's no hard and fast rule. It is very subjective. But then again, actually, okay, I'm not a big sports buff, but does somebody, do one of you three have an example from sports where a judge or a referee has to make a subjective call?
It's like the charge rule in basketball.
It happens every single play with football. Holding calls in football are completely subjective all the time, and it literally every single play of a football game you could call holding. It's just when it crosses over a certain threshold that they actually enforce it. And I'm talking American football, obviously.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, well, I mean, soccer also famously.
Sure, diving.
So.
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, and right. So there are a lot of subjective calls. So maybe we have to accept this is a gray area. This is subjective. So, okay, that's what it is. And if a judge gives a game loss, maybe it needs to be conferred because they need to like justify it with a colleague. Maybe something like that has to happen. But
the problem is, though, every single game is watched in that situation, right? Like there is a referee observing the contest, and we have unwatched games in Magic, and that's where.
Yeah. And my argument might be that it's not a comp rel thing. Maybe at comp rel, the punishment for slow play is different than at pro rel. At pro rel, you might say you're not allowed to take this time because it's an unfair advantage. At comp rel, we understand you're competitive, but you may not be as familiar with your deck. You might be trying to get to the next level, and we're going to accept that there is a learning curve. So we're not going. So slow play will be enforced kind of as it is today. Like it has to be a little more egregious. But maybe at pro rel, where like your professionals behave like it, and we will enforce penalties in a way that assumes that you are professional players that care about the game. I don't know if that's the right answer, but it's a possible outcome, right? Like maybe we're harsher on slow play at pro rel, and that might have enough of an effect because once you habituate that, it goes down, right? Because those are the matches that get seen the most, and that cascades back down. I'm hoping. I don't know. It's a rough subject.
Yeah, a lot of food for thought. Yeah, like in Annie's referring to, he makes me think of the NBA finals that happened where there was like a debatable charging call that decided game one, and after a while being angry, they have to accept whatever rule, and LeBron James has accepted rules that have gone either for him or against him. Due to subjectivity. But Bryan brings a good point as well. Like a lot of these games are not only ref by one person, but multiple refs. So yeah, tough to see. And I really don't see it going digital just because people just like to hold their cards. They like to choose their deck box and stuff like that. And we like to have these GPs to, I don't know, everyone likes their dice and everything. And I'm also thinking, although it's not a direct comparison of how certain poker casinos try to port over digital cards and dealers, and ended up like the player base ended up dying, and they had to scrap it and bring back the real dealers. That happened actually in the casino in Montreal. Actually, they never had real dealers, but they had to scrap it and find like people actually like holding real cards despite living in the digital age. So despite the increase in popularity of all these other digital games, I just don't. Yeah, I just see the pluses on paper Magic too much, and so I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss at how you could, and with the stats that these guys showed, like Eduardo mentioned, it's not even statistical significant that you could tell if someone's really abusing it or not. So there's the trouble of that. I mean, can't even look at the stats and say, like, with some certainty that this guy, there's some issue with it. But you can say that, oh, this guy plays really, really fast and slick. Like Owen basically never goes to time. Was only gone to time once or something absurd. So, but Eduardo, is this like the type of feedback that people can give you when it comes to your role as the pro player consultant?
Yeah. So on that, the key. So there's a few aspects to that. The first thing is a key part of what Wizards wants is feedback on future systems and future announcements. And that's a part of why this exists. Now, I may not be the thing is, I've gotten feedback from a lot of different people in a lot of different areas. I got somebody from South Africa talking to me about the PTQ system, somebody talking to me about the GPs, somebody was just talking about Magic Pro representation in Asia. There's very different people. But the key for me from this feedback is I'll remember. So yeah, we had a new cat, by the way. You can hear it. But yeah, the thing from my side is I don't know what issues might come up, and I'll try to bring up what I can, like what makes sense. But I want to understand what the community's thought process and vibe is at now, because like even if I can't solve the problem you come to me with, right? Like I hear what's going on, it's causing you like to enjoy Magic less, and there's another situation that might cause you to enjoy Magic more. Then I can at least try to understand what your goal out of Magic is and what your thought process is, so that when I'm going into seeing future feedback, even though like you may not have thought of it, my mind is this type of player will love this, or this type of player will have an issue with this because of this. Like either they don't care and that's fine, or actually they will care but they can't integrate well. So can we change like just C here to suit these people? And I think that's important for me. Is there's a lot of things that I can't give feedback on because I don't know what's going to come up, but I just need to understand what the mentality is. So if you come to me and you explain what's concerning you, I will remember that. And then when it comes up, assuming I'm like awake and get it right, I'll try to make sure that the player type you are gets that feedback in, because I want to get like a pulse on the community. And that's whether you like something. If you like something and don't want to see it change at all, you definitely should get in touch. I know you usually get feedback because something's wrong, but get in touch, please, because if something's going well and nobody's talking about it, then like you don't want to change something that's going well. That just never works.
I got a few more questions for Eduardo, but Bryan has to go. So thanks, Q, so much for coming back on, Bryan. And of course, anyone can find you at Bryan Go. That's how I say it, Bryan Go, and all your game podcasts. And definitely subscribe with your favorite podcast app, the Game Podcast, and the feed has the head game stuff as well. Anything else you would like to plug? And your articles on SCG. I'm doing it all for you.
I've got so many forms of media now. You have to get them all in there. Yeah, head games, game podcast, articles on SCG. I think you checked all the boxes. Thank you for having me back, KYT. I'll try not to stay away so long the next time. I promise.
Hey, it's a joy, and maybe even to have you and Eduardo on, because seems to have some great discussion here with Eduardo on organized play, and I know you always super passionate about the esports world, and Eduardo as well. So
absolutely,
I will see you next time. Thanks, Bryan.
Take care, everyone.
It was Bryan Gottileb, my man, one of the originals of First Strike, one of the originals of a lot of podcasts that I've started with him. Eduardo, so when this was announced, I think a lot of players see the casual crowd see all the pros as this clique and every stuff like that, but what type of person should be able to give you feedback? Like how low does it go? Is it the FNM grinder? Can he give you some input, or is it more GP and Pro Tour?
Okay, so this is clearly set up because they want a pro player consultant perspective. So there's definitely a focus on, as far as I can tell, competitive play. That said, it cascades down. Like something that happens at PPTQ's FNM, even pre-releases, like can have an impact on pro play, because not necessarily because of systems in place, but because of image. And the thing I started with pre-releases because for me, those were the best tournaments, because I had a limited budget to buy product. So I would go to a pre-release because it was I could spend half a day. I could buy the product I wanted to do for that set, and I could beat people. But the thing is, with pre-releases in some areas, you're gonna see people, because pre-releases regroup like everybody from the Magic community. That's where you like get the first timers and like Pro Tour champions in the same room, and they're both happy to be there. So pre-releases are a good example of, well, if you have like, I can't like change pre-releases or give so much feedback on them, because I mean, like fundamentally, I don't think the question is going to come up that much. But if you're in that environment and say like the image of it is concerning you, or you really like the image of it, and like there's A and B aspect that are great, that are driving you to go towards competitive play. Like say you started pre-releases and you saw, and B and C like were the things that made you go to PPTQs or a GP and you're like having a blast. Well, that's important to know. because that's the stuff that gets you into competitive play. So if it's linked to competitive play and it's getting you in that direction, let me know, because even if I don't have an influence on the system because the question doesn't come up or it's decided or it's not the team's responsibility, that feedback can still go through, right? Like I might say like player B really enjoyed this aspect of the pre-release. They got to talk to this player and that's what happened. And that got me thinking that maybe like, like maybe there's something from there. I will say though, like for me, I guess the pure minimum from the feedback would be like that competitive circle. So like lower than PPTQs would probably be not something I can give feedback on, like back, because I don't think there's gonna be like if I do FNMs, like I don't think that's the rule there. But remember that it may affect the stream or something. So I think PPTQs and that system is roughly where you want to try to get me at. But if there's something that you've noticed at another level, like let me know. Like that's it, because I mean, we're going to have initial talks, and if you get to me beforehand, that's better, because once the initial talks have happened, that puts you on a process, and I know how that works. You get like more additional like work piled on, and like you try to see through that because that's already a big enough task.
And how did you go about, is it like coverage? You had to ask the right people, you had to opt in to be one of the people selected as one of the 3 consultants?
So the process itself, I don't know how much I can share on specifically. I guess the best thing is it was an application that was very important. And it was an application targeted at active pro players. So the people targeted were mostly, almost all exclusively platinum. There might have been players a little bit below that, but like for sure that was the targeted group, because they were looking for players in that sphere. So yeah, there was an application process, and they're looking for that type of player. That's about as
I don't want you to get in trouble. I don't need you to go into
no, it's fine. And I mean, the stuff is like, I know they want regional representation because that's important for them, and they want perspective. They want essentially that these 3 or 4 people, or however many they get per session of time, represent a swath of the Magic community and are able to bring a bunch of different points of view to the table, and that's critical to them. And I know, like, I can personally tell you what I wrote in, because I essentially put in front kind of the video game background and like designing systems and the international aspect, because I know that those are the 2 keys for me. Like the fact that I've been in multiple cultures, that I hang out with people from Europe, APAC, North America, the fact that I've moved to different countries and all that stuff, like I know that that's important, and that was a key part of the process, and that's something key. So like I want to make sure that like it's not because you're like, I got somebody contacting me from South Africa, and I thought that was amazing, because the challenges that they face there are so different from everybody else, and it was good to get that voice in, because maybe there's nothing you can do, but maybe there's a small bone you can throw. I don't know what that bone is, but it's part of that discussion. I can say, well, this person got in touch with me. That's how their community is. Is there something we can do for the people in that community? And then, that's it. I think it's important that Magic is enjoyed globally. That to me is critical. That Magic is a game that is enjoyed globally, but that things do not work in every culture. FNM, for example, in England was, it might have changed since, but it was not a disaster. It was a semi-disaster in our area, because Tuesday night is when people had free from work and would come and play, but Friday was pub night. Nobody wanted to come and play FNM. It's just reality. Nobody wanted FNM because they would be at the pub on Friday nights. And that's a cultural thing, right? There's other cultures, for whatever reasons, other programs may not work. And it's important to bring that perspective back. I understand why FNM works in North America. Like when I worked here, I was like, well, we have an earlier day off, and it's super easy to get to because there's stores everywhere. And it doesn't take an abnormal amount of time. So I'm like, okay, FNM makes sense here, but it didn't where I live. And it's not to knock on the program, right? But one size doesn't fit all, and Wizards is very aware of that. They are aware of that.
Yeah, I was always surprised at the local level, even the local face-to-face game store, to see like the weekly tournaments, like Monday and Tuesday have people, because as a student, like as a busy student, I didn't have time to go and play Monday, Tuesday, but sometimes, hey, people just want to let off steam work, and Monday Modern or Tuesday Legacy is just a perfect time for them to drop by, especially since it's usually at face-to-face, it's just 4 rounds, and people know when it ends, and they're happy, and they get the rounds in, and they go home. So definitely can see that. And I have to say, I'm happy to see. I was wary when I read the announcement, and John Stern, who was on the show 2 weeks ago, had mentioned, there's a bunch of NDA that he had to sign, so he didn't know how much he had to say. So definitely understand not being able to go into great detail, but the result of it all, you, Willie Edel, and Hugh and Jensen being the 3, really happy, and not just because you're on with the result. Man, I just really happy that was you 3.
Yeah, I mean, Willie, I've had great Huey, I don't know as much. I have respect for him, but that's like I don't know him as much, so that's just so you can't say much. But Willie, I've had a lot of respect over the years. Like I met him a couple of years ago, I guess, Feroz in Dublin. That was a few years, 4 or 5 years, like 5 years now, cheers. And I have a lot of respect for what Willie did with the Brazilian community. So like I know Huey's very level-headed, and he has a very tabletop approach, which, you said people like to handle physical cards, and I think that's a very important consideration to bring to the table, right? I said, like, I come from like a video game realm, and I understand systems that are digital and online, but it's important that you respect the wishes of people that play tabletop, because people are committing a large amount of their time and money flying to these tournaments to play a paper card game. So it's important that people are doing this for a reason. Like, my personal reason is I like to hang out with friends. We get to chill for a week and all that stuff. But that's not as easy with a digital card game. And people like that atmosphere. So you have to keep that perspective, because you have this player base from the last 25 years. You can't just switch over to digital. But at the same time, I know that people on MTGO and in the future arena, I mean, like, is there a link up there? That question of link up between like digital and live has been asked like in 2009. I remember those discussions like earlier. The second Planeswalker points were announced, people were like, oh, what if your like MTGO results were there? Like, so that's like an infinitely long discussion. And like, Wizards decided against it, and there's probably a good reason for that. But that those questions are probably going to pop up more. So you have to respect that there's the wishes of tabletop. How do you integrate all these people that are going to come through Arena? Because we're assuming that Arena will be at least, I would say, semi-successful. From what I've seen, like, it will attract at least an influx of new players into Magic. So how do you transition these people into tabletop, or do you have systems for them that are just purely online? And how does that play experience work if they want to connect into and segue into like pro competitive play? Even like they're like, well, I played Arena all the time. There's a GP. How does this actually work? Like, how do I get physical cards? Like, these are like really complicated questions as well to answer.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know. I had while you're talking, I have all these images flashing in my head. Like, I know blackjack players love to like look really slowly, so they love to feel the cards. And now, but I'm thinking of the good question you asked. Like, if Arena is as successful as it looks, like, what do they do with this player base that they've just assembled? Like, what do they push them towards? So, man, I don't know yet. I'm sure. I feel like they probably have a plan in mind, but
sure. Of course, there's a plan. Like they thought, like, this isn't random. Like, this is a company that's investing a large amount of money into a product. This isn't random. I don't have to. This is obvious from the offset. But they care, so they don't want to come up with a solution that they think is not going to work. They're gonna it's gonna take the time it takes, because I've seen this in various companies. I've worked in that environment sometimes, and sometimes, like, if you work in a small team and you have a community that's very clear, you can just push things quickly. But other times you have to take the time, and you have to consider what the impact is. Because I mean, the example I use, like Planeswalker points for MTGO wins or something, that like has wide swaths of applications across the board that I can't even phantom right now. And like, that's I don't even take that suggestion to heart. That was just an example. Is even something that like seems small, you're like, well, what does it actually do? I'm like, it just widens an insane world, because it means you're connecting online accounts to people, like for everybody. and then like it might influence live play, and that's already like a super complicated question because there's also no cap on like this, like all this stuff is super hard. And some people just want to play digitally. They never want to transition into live play, and I think that's something that should also be respected. There shouldn't be this pressure that you have to play live if you wanted to progress. I mean, if you wanted to progress like the absolute highest level, then maybe, sure. But there should be a lot of steps before you even get to that stage where it's mandatory, right? MTGO, if you like, you have to hit the Pro Tour level before you're forced to play actual cards. Like, if you're you can play mocks and PDQs, and like until you qualify for one of those, you don't have to touch a card. So as many concerns I have with MTGO as a product over the years, one of them that I do not have is that the user experience remains digital, and you never are forced to go out of it unless something absolutely exceptional happens to you. And I think that's a big plus. So I'll give it props there for sure.
Man, lots of good stuff from you. We're gonna wrap up the show with a few last questions. Eduardo, DreamHack, you were there. You've been there in the past. Are you gonna be the? No, I don't know because you tweeted. I'm struggling because I know
it's fine. Like, okay, so Detroit and DreamHack are same weekend, so GG for me. Like, okay, so like, no, go ahead. Like, ask the question. Sorry.
Yeah. I was actually if you were going back to DreamHack, and I just realized that I'd seen your tweet posting like your entire schedule for the next 2 months. I completely forgot.
I would 100% go back because I get out of my bed and go to the event. That's a big plus to me. No, but like the experience. So this is gonna sound weird. I don't want to like. I mean, for me, like Magic is a game I'm kind of invested in, but I played Hearthstone there because like Magic wasn't part of DreamHack, and it's not this year again. But the big thing for me was with Hearthstone, I find that the play experience it's really, really weird, but I do not really truly, I only enjoy Hearthstone for the solo content, which I think is very high quality, and the absolute top level play. Arena is like a bad form of draft as far as I'm concerned. Like Magic draft is just levels around Hearthstone Arena, and ladder for me is as close to it's awful. Like, I mean, it's maybe the best of a bad bunch, but ladder to me is just full of like bad feelings. Like, I dislike competitive ladder very strongly. Like, I'm okay with it like at legend rank, but like below it, it's just not a pleasant experience because it's just about playing and grinding, and that's all it's about. You don't feel like you're moving anywhere. But competitive Hearthstone, if you ever have the chance to actually go to one of those tournaments, there's not that many, and you're going to face some really hard competition. So I'm warning you right now. You're going to go to one or two if you are interested. And it's going to take you a ton of time to prepare because you have to choose 4 decks. So, yeah, you have to be, like, on the nose, and you have to think about your whole lineup strategy and how it's going to work. I was very lucky in Montreal, like, in my games, my decks as well. Like, I brought a deck that like basically everybody played afterwards. It's just that I identified it as a really strong choice because in Hearthstone, what you don't have in Magic is you can ban your opponent's deck. Obviously in Magic, you can't do this because they have one deck. So if you ban that deck, well, there's no more decks. So that doesn't work. But in Hearthstone, your opponent can ban one of 4 decks. So the idea is that if there's a balancing issue, you can just say this is just ridiculous. So get rid of that. And that's the tournament I played in. There was a deck that was like tier 0. It was like beyond. It was like the most broken deck the game has seen. Like, it was absurd. It was roughly Skull Clamp Affinity. Like, this is the level we're talking about. Like, that's how good that deck was. But if you got rid of it, then this deck became very good because that was its only awful matchup. So, like, we figured it out. We played a super bad version. I played a super, super bad version of it, but it was still good enough. It was like Kellis of Rogue for those that play Hearthstone. But I thought what was interesting with live Hearthstone tournament is like a lot of these people aren't used to playing live. So like you're playing against somebody from the computer and they like they take out their frustrations on the computer normally, but they're live, so they don't know what to do. Like I had a player physically like throw up their arms in the air and be like, "What the hell is this?" Like things you would never see in Magic. because they're just used to being in front of their computer. They just don't have that social habituation of being in front of an opponent and having to be cordial. And I thought the experience was surreal. I think DreamHacks in general are good, whether you do competitions or not. There's like tons of stuff to do. So, I mean, I would check it out. Like, I think that Shadowverse is paying accommodation for competitors, which I think is like unreal. Yeah, I love seeing what happens in the digital card space because a lot of people are coming on board that have seen what happened with Magic, and they're trying their own thing, and you can relearn from what they do, and we can all evolve as a result. And I think there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in that space too.
Yeah, Jerry got me onto Shadowverse, and you're right. They're flying. I think I read quickly. They're paying for accommodation for people flying in just for that. And well, first come first serve, probably filled by now, but really nice of them to do that. So I'm jumping on in because might enter just because I don't want to just be a spectator. The last one for you, Eduardo, is have you been following Standard a lot? We've been trying to narrow Andy's deck choice with the RPTQ in Toronto, and since you have any quick thoughts?
Oh yeah. I was hearing about Andy's deck deliberation with Teferi. So something that wasn't mentioned in that whole discussion, and okay, so this is a little longer in the podcast, and this was a while back. So to recap, Andy seems to really love Teferi, and I was studying those decks when I was like trying to do my choice for Providence. And one of the things that stuck out with me was that Teferi decks were very, very good game one. They were absurdly good because decks are not normally set up to fight the card Teferi. They're not, unfortunately, that well set up because if you have one or two dead cards in hand, it's really hard to fight Teferi. And once Teferi untaps, like, you're just dead. Because the control deck is set up to beat you game one, but you're not set up to beat the control deck. But the fact is, your opponents are boarding in Duress or Negate. Almost everybody's doing Duress or Negate. And that makes Teferi way weaker in these sports board matchups because, I mean, Negate is horrible for you. Like, Duress is one thing. Like, you can still top deck, you can still slam it, and there are things that can happen. But Negate is, you're tapping out 5 mana, and if they're like any kind of not control deck with Negate, you're just like stratosphered with Teferi. And you need to rely on Torrential Gearhulk, which is a good plan B. So as for decks, red black is clearly like you won't beat red black because red black is the best deck for a reason, but you have to have a plan against them. So like you can accept that you're playing a deck that's not red black as long as you have an extremely clear plan in your 75 as to deal with them, because chances are half your matches will be red black or red based decks at least at top level. Some of them will be like Gitu Lava Runner, and some of them will be Rekindling Phoenix decks. And you need to be ready for both. They're very different decks. I think if you're a red player, Bob's your uncle. You've got choices. You can be super aggressive, a little more mid-rangey. Do what you want. You're happy. You're a happy camper. Those decks are good. They've got a proactive plan, and their cards are good in a variety of situations. If you're not a red player, well, that's a little hard. You can play Teferi. Teferi is the single most powerful card to resolve. But then the rest of the Teferi decks may lack, so you have to kind of make that decision. As to the shell. The deck that has won a lot recently has been blue-black midrange. Autumn Burchett won UK Nationals with it. Emma Hannity won a classic. Jadine wrote about it on SCG Premium. That deck, I think, if you're a very good player, is an excellent choice. If you think that you're above the average player quality in your field, I think it's an amazing choice because it allows you to attack from the angle you want or need to attack. It is as close to an aggro tempo deck as you're going to have in this format. So it allows you to adapt your game plan to what your opponent's doing in a deck that they're not already ready to fight as they would with red-black. So I think it's a really interesting choice. I think that the gift decks are okay. They've had surprisingly good win rates overall. Not many people play them, though, and a lot of top players choose not to play them. So I mean, buyer beware for me on the gift decks. And if you're not like comfortable with them, you will make mistakes. I mean, I played Sultai Gift in Providence, and for sure there were 2 matches I lost because of my own lack of familiarity with the deck, and that's something important to acknowledge. Standard is more diverse than you think. I think if you like have zero experience in the format, like literal zero, you can take one of the polar strategies, Teferi control, or Gitu Lava Runner, like super polar strategies. Like if you're used to playing red aggro or control, you'll be very happy with those. If you know a bit more about standard, red black mid range, blue black mid range are very good choices. And I think if you're like super knowledgeable, then you'll know more than me. But I guess like I would probably, if I was gonna go in a field where I felt I was better than the opposition, I would play blue black mid range probably. If I felt I was the same level, I would play a version of red black that was good for the mirror. More Rekindling Phoenix is your key card, so have more Rekindling Phoenix. Start cutting a bit on the Hazarets. Have more Rekindling Phoenix. That card is the mirror breaker in against all the red decks. So make sure that you're playing the highest number of unfair copies in your red mirrors. Like especially if you're picking up the deck cold, it doesn't matter what they do. Phoenix is really bad for them. So yeah, I think that kind of is a little broad, but yeah.
Broken it down. Any hope it helps?
I think so. I don't know. I've played a lot of blue-black mid-range, and I'm hearing a lot of very smart people say good things about it, so I might have to give it the shot it truly deserves.
All right, let's wrap things up. Eduardo, where can people find you and check your content out, or even stream? Like, lay it all out for our listeners.
Sorry about that. Mic was off. My apologies. Let me repeat that. Okay. So if they want to find me, as I said, sorry. As I said, muted. A lot of the places I have to do a life evaluation of what I want to do. So right now you can follow me online on Twitter at Walaoompa. So WALAOUMPA. I may stream in the future. I really want to, but I have to figure out how to best set this up so it's permanent, because I like the experiment I did in December. It was very December, January, streaming Freddie Martin decks. That was cool, but I want to make it more regular, so that's going to take time. But my Twitch stream, same name. I will be a lot of GPs, East Coast mainly, but a little bit in the middle as well. So I don't want to miss any, but if you're going to Richmond, Detroit, Atlanta, not Minneapolis, Milwaukee, New Jersey, I'll be there. And I might do a trip where I go to Warsaw, Shizuoka, and Liverpool. So there's lots of opportunities to see me there in person. If you have feedback for me, we haven't discussed yet between the three of us, like Willie and Huey, like what the formal feedback process is, if there is going to be any. You are always welcome to message me on Twitter at Walaoompa. Get in touch and like give me feedback. If you want to give it to me in private, just tell me I want to DM you in private about like the consultancy stuff. That's fine, and we'll do that. People want to be private for a variety of reasons. I do not judge. If you want to give your feedback in private, totally fine. And I think that's mostly the place you can get me. For now, Twitter, hopefully in the future, stream. And if you see me at a live event, just come say hi. Absolutely.
All right. I don't know. Did you plug MTG Mint Card?
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah, I forget I write articles. So I'm part of Team MTG Mint Card, which is not relevant to trying to find me. But it's true that I write for mtgmintcard.com. And I want to write more articles too. I've written in the past, and I need to write more. I did write, the last article was on that Hall of Fame ballot that we discussed in the episode. To be fair, if like you've listened to what I had to say and there was like a topic you wanted me to expand on, feel free to also get in touch with me and ask me like, could you write more about this? And then like, because for me, that tells me that there's a desire to hear more. I mean, last week I asked if people wanted to hear about Salt Lake Gift. I got very few responses. So I got, well, there's 2 people interested. Maybe not the direction I need to take this in. But if I see a lot more attention in the topic, then I will address it. I think that's important. And, it's always important to get ideas for articles. I read on mtgmintcard.com. Yeah.
I've referenced a lot of some of the articles you've written in the past, and maybe it's a small section of us, like the people that love when you go deep on a deck, provide that good old sideboard guide, like your Grixis Death Shadow.
Yeah.
Definitely look that up and use that at a tournament and reference that. So sweet stuff from Eduardo. Andy, what's new with you? Just outside of the RPTQ, anything? Are you planning any GPs after that?
Yeah, I've got GP Detroit, then GP Montreal, and SCG Syracuse in the next 2 months, essentially.
All right. You ready? Shout out. So we'll wrap up the show with shouting out people in the First Strike producers, Derek Pye, J. Thomas Eden, Jonathan Good, Matthew Kelly, and Sash Papo. If you like this show, consider donating a few dollars at patreon.com/firststrike. Or if not, you can just leave a comment. That'd be great. Subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, because I think Eduardo was a wonderful guest, and I'd love to have him on a future show. With that said, Eduardo, have fun at the GP, and I'm sure you're gonna kill it. And thank you so much for giving me your time.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. It was super fun to talk about a lot of these topics. Like, they've been fresh on my mind the last 2 weeks, the last week or so, and it's been hectic. It's been difficult to place all of this in the right context. So yeah, this has been great.
And I'm excited for our listeners to be able to, our podcast listeners, to have a better sense of you as a person and how you think as well. I think this did an excellent job. So for Andy, Eduardo, I will see you guys next week. And yeah, have fun at your event. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.